All right, we are live back week 2, episode 2 here for Rise and Grind from the playing field to parenthood. I'm Alex Gomez with Danielle Laurie. We are here talking all things Olympics this week and getting into the nitty gritty of past Olympics, really recent Olympics, future Olympics. We're going to talk all the things. So we're going to go for as long as we can, and if it continues, it continues. But we're going to see how that goes.
I know, it's kind of like we're going back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much to cover, but I think the most important things is to kind of cover the dates and times that like we would remember as athletes.
Yeah.
And that's never to knock on the 96 or the 2000 Olympics. I just can't say that I remember visually watching and being all about it.
Yeah, that wasn't really.
But you can't take away. Like, I'm doing all the research yesterday because I think it was cool to like go back and reminisce 2008 and look at our scores with Canada. Like, I didn't remember the exact scores and stuff, but I mean, obviously 96 was in Georgia, and it was interesting because when I'm looking, and it was obviously US won, China came second. China was so good. They've always been good.
Yes.
But they didn't qualify for the 2020, so they weren't in there, which was super weird. But when I'm looking at it in Georgia, like US went 8-1, right? So like they lost one game, they lost to Australia. And playing with Lefty, what was pitcher's name at Hawaii?
Yeah, Kaya Parnaby.
Yes, Parnaby. Like, Aussies have always been contenders every single Olympic Games to try to fight.
Their like length of career is insane. I mean, like they're in it. I mean, in the US, you maybe get 5 years out of it, like professionally, internationally, whatever you decide. But like Australians, we have, who was it? Stacey. I can't think of her last name. Porter, thank you. Just retired like last year, and she's been in it since 96. Like, she's been in it. So they're like Energizer bunnies. They just keep going.
The last time I checked, do you know who her partner is?
Who?
Melanie Roach, who's the pitcher for Australia. So Roach went to the 96 Olympics. Roach went to the 2000 Olympics. She went to 2004 and 2008. And Stacey Porter did not go when I was looking in 1996, but she went 2000. She went 04. Like, and then you think about
24 years ago.
And you think about the times in between, though, of the 2012 and the 2016 Olympics that some of these athletes obviously didn't get the chance to play in because softball wasn't in the Olympics.
Right.
So some of these women could have so many under their belt. But to even think of like that piece, and the US is the US, I love them. But when I really think of like some of the coolest teams that I've been around when I was like in the Village in 08, it's definitely Australia. Their vibe and energy and their chemistry is like nothing else. And you obviously played with Kaya Parnaby, and so you get to see kind of how the Aussies like to go about their business. But I think what I always almost felt jealous of was that they could just go and play and it looked like they had a lot of fun. And sometimes I felt like with the national team experience, it's a job, it's hardcore. You're going out there and you're going to war. But the way they did it, I always appreciated, because it looked like they're having a hell of a good time.
Some of the best teammates I've ever had. Kaya, Claire Warwick, Duzzy. They all are they're just such genuinely good, like happy people. Like, they just approach it like they know it's a game and they're competitive as hell, but like just their aura, like it just made everything fun and like exciting. So yeah, I definitely can confirm that they're some of the best teammates you'll ever experience. So that makes sense that you could see that just being near them. Yeah.
Well, in the 96 and the 2000, had my girl Michelle Smith like still listening on the podcast, but they had a little Smitty who's up there, does the ESPN stuff as well. She's been doing it for a long time. But when I was going at that 2000 Olympics, I mean, they had 3 losses in that 2000, gold medal run that they had. And I know it doesn't matter if you lose games early. When you have 8 teams, you can sacrifice a game or two.
Right.
But I mean, at the end of the day, they had won in 96, they won in 2000. And then when you turn the page and you go to 2004, in my opinion, on paper and on the field, that could be the best team that the U.S. has ever fielded, ever. And no other team, in my opinion, I think, can beat the parity that they were able to put out there.
That combination of players, yeah, for sure.
And the confidence, like, it's funny because I was, you look at the run of that 2004 and you really heard about the grind. Remember they were doing that bus tour?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like putting in so much work. And I think the one thing that really resonated, because I got the opportunity to play with Kelly Kretschmann, right, when we played with the USSSA Pride together. And she said she'd never in her life been pushed to that level for how hard they had to work under Kendrea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing that you think about in that whole run, like when Kendrea, I can't remember if it was just before or after he left, his wife passed away. She had that
right then and there. Yep, I remember that
aneurysm. And like that run that team was able to do was one of the biggest Olympic moments, I think, ever, for not only like being able to collectively come together and have his back, but like there's no one better. Like, you really look at the list of people, like Kretschmann to me is one of the best. You think about Natasha Watley, I've gotten the chance to play with, like their pitchers. You think of the Lisa Fernandez, like obviously Jenny Finch, who's the queen. I just don't think that anyone tops that. And that was the year. So Australia came second in that Olympics. And that was Ueno. So you knew Kikui Ueno, who plays for Team Japan. She was the first athlete ever in the Olympics to throw a perfect game, and she threw one against China. And then I think that just goes on to talk about that young lady and obviously the athletic career that she still has into her 40s.
It's crazy.
But that's a whole other conversation.
We'll talk about the I don't want to call them old farts, but like they're getting up there. Like that is it, the amount of like routine and commitment and just consistency that takes. Like not only did you do it, but you're continuing to do it as your body changes. And like, I mean, I can't even like, I wake up some days and I'm like, this hurts. Like I hurt right now. And it's, they're still going out there and doing the conditioning and doing the weights and doing the reps. It's like, that's just such a testament to their devotion. But like all of those names that you're saying, like, I know we talked about me going to UCLA games growing up and like watching like Stacey Newman, but Lisa Fernandez, Natasha Watley, all on those teams. And so for them to all come together on that Olympic team is just like, that was the epitome of softball in that day and age, with no like coverage, no media, no social media, right, to talk about it. Like we literally had to tune in at that time or like plug in your VCR and record it. Like that's how far back this was. And when you look at it from that perspective, it took so much more for fans to be a part of that. And that's why I think like that tour was so important, was because they were going face to face. You couldn't just text everybody. Like this was back when, number one, texting probably wasn't even a thing. But then even if it was, like, you remember, like you were limited, like you had 100 text messages going out and 100 text messages. You had to like count, right? Every month you had like a quota of things you sent, or, oh, don't talk till after 9 p.m. because that's when it's free. Don't go over my minutes. Like, so just the entire face of like coverage and being able to support was so different then. And it's just, that to me makes them, it just puts them a little bit, not, I don't want to say higher, but like, it's just such a different quality of commitment from them and from the fans at that point to really like be a part of those runs with them. So,
and I think the coolest thing is like, you think about all of the powerful women in that group, right? Like to take the ego piece out of it and to be able to have a coach, and there was a lot of coaches on staff, but I mean, Kendrea is the goat of goats to me, right? So I think his ability to be able to go into that type of environment and make it equal across the board. You can't have one person have a bigger ego than the other. And you're talking about like players like Crystal Bustos and Stacey Newman. I mean, Florida, the 5 runs in the final that they played against Australia were home runs off of 2 from Crystal Bustos and 1 from Nuvi. Like 4 out of the 5 runs. And you look at those things and you're like, I mean, those are the people that kill you. But for them to be able to all play together, all be in sync. I mean, that to me is the hardest piece about coaching at the Olympic level. It's the most competitive. There's only 15 athletes that can make a roster, which truly feels like a crime at times. And then y'all got to get them to kind of play and move in the right direction.
They have to see that it's bigger than individual.
Yeah.
It's such an individual journey to get there, to be selected, to go through that like rigorous selection process, but then to then have to flip it on its head and say, okay, I know you worked extra hard to get here and you earned your spot, but now you need to realize that everybody around you, this team is bigger than yourself, and you have to now put that aside and do everything that's for them. So yeah, I think that's, I mean, Candrea, well, and I think that's something we should talk about in a later episode too, is like those coaches that have just changed the face of softball for us. Just the ones, not even the ones that haven't been around that long. I just think there's so many more now that have made such a huge impact on the sport itself. So we'll definitely come back to Candrea, because I do think that and them going out and doing that for him when he was going through what he was going through, that takes loyalty from your players to make it about that instead of about themselves. And I don't know about you, but like I feel like whenever there's something bigger that you're fighting for, it just changes the way that you approach the game.
Yeah. And things that may bother you don't bother you anymore. You know, that they were very close with Candrea's wife too, that group was. And you think about a couple of the women that played, like Finch, she played at Arizona. She played for Candrea. She knew, you know, his wife on a personal level. And you're so right and spot on with that piece. Like at times we see life and the littlest things are so hard, right? Like, oh my God, that frustrates me. But man, when you're in an Olympic run, you're trying to make a roster and you're finally in the thick of it, you learn real quick the things that matter and the things that don't, and the things that can get your dome. And then also like the importance of being able to like have a good mindset throughout all of it. Because I mean, you let one thing take you that way, you're letting the team down, you're letting the 14 other women down. And that is one thing that I can say about that team is they walked around with this confidence. But like they were so locked in together. Like you knew that they had each other's backs like through and through. And it's not to take away from Australia and the players that they had. They were legit. And I look at Japan, and that was Emi Naito. She was actually the coach of the team over in Japan that I played for. She played shortstop. Yukiko Ueno, Eri Yamada. Like those are players that I played against. But that was when they were first starting out. Ueno for sure, and Eri Yamada. But Emi Naito was the GOAT of all GOATs for Japan, right? Like, so, you know, winners win. And that US team, like that was kind of when my dad would always get the subscriptions to the Sports Illustrated. And I remember getting, after the Olympic Games, that Team USA photo of the women's softball on the front of the cover of the Sports Illustrated. And I was like, shit, that's a big deal. Like, because back in the day, you weren't seeing a whole lot of female athletes that were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was like always the dudes, right?
The only other one I can think of was soccer, was
women's soccer. Yeah. When she took her shirt off.
Took her shirt off. Yep. Exactly. Like that's like a specific image. So like seeing the US softball team, like softball, like nobody watched softball. Nobody was that. It wasn't a big deal. So for it to be on Sports Illustrated, that was a big deal. Yeah.
So to transition to 2005, funny story. So 2005 was the first ever year of the World Cup of Softball at Oklahoma City. I don't know if you remember when that was playing back in the day, but it would be on softball or on ESPN, excuse me, for that short stint. It was Belle Smith and Eric Collins that called the games. And that was my first summer with Team Canada in 2005. So this was the first ever World Cup of Softball, and really funny story. So we're there, and obviously I didn't know Oklahoma City. I hadn't been there. I hadn't been to college yet. 2006 was my freshman year. I'm like, dang, this is beautiful. We don't have this in Canada. You don't see this.
Yeah.
We don't see this type of weather either. That's for sure. So we're going there. We're starting to play games, and we're up on the practice fields. And I remember our coach sitting us down and saying like, hey, like we're playing the US tomorrow. We've never beat the US. And I don't know if this was exactly said, but this is the way that I perceived the comment, because maybe I'm a psycho and that's probably why I wore the Michael Jordan like shirt. 'Cause you know how there's things that you'll like make up in your head to make you a better competitor? And he was so big on that throughout that Last Dance like series. But for some reason, I remember her saying, like, you know, we've never beat the US, and like that's why we're going to throw Danielle tomorrow. Like, because I was just this young buck on this team, you know, I was didn't really know. And I remember like taking that and running with that. However it was perceived or said, I saw red. And it may not have been said like that exact way, but that's how I took it. And I remember going back to the Marriott hotel. We didn't have cell phones, calling on the hotel phone to my parents and being like, hey, I'm going to start tomorrow. And I think this is what like the coach meant when she said it. And I didn't really know Lori Sipple well at the time, so we were still starting to like get to know each other. My dad's like, dude, what a cool opportunity for you, your team, to be able to play them, and you're going to get to figure it out, like you're going to college next year. And that next day we went and we gave US the first loss ever. We beat them 3-2, and I would say probably 70% of the same lineup from that 2004 team was on that 2005 World Cup of softball team. Yeah. And that was probably one of the biggest eye-opening experiences for me. Not where I was like, oh God, I'm so nervous, because I didn't know, like ignorance was bliss. I didn't know any better. Right. But to be able to like do that in that moment with the pressure, them coming off the biggest run probably ever in undefeated 2004 Athens Olympics, gold medal, the list goes on, made me realize like on any given day, anyone can be beaten. And I think it gave me this sense of confidence that every athlete I feel like needs to feel, that I'm the shit. And I'm willing to be able to say that out loud, because if we don't believe it, it doesn't just happen. You have to have those moments where you can do something that's really hard, that opens your eyes to like, damn, I can do something big in this sport. And I'd never been tested against an offense like that, or every inning meaning so much. So for me, that was kind of like the storyline going into my freshman year, which obviously put pressure on at another level. But I mean, that was Canada's first ever win against Team USA. And it was just kind of like this stamp and a special, super special moment for our team.
Well, for you too. And like, do you think personally, so when you saw red, was it that you feel like they were putting you in because they saw it as a wash, like they didn't see any hope of winning, so hey, we're going to put Danielle into pitch?
That's how I perceived it. And if
which
that
is
was
crazy.
But if that was the coaching tactic, it fully worked.
Right. But like, they might not have even intended, right? Like you said, like that might not have been their intent. Like they might have just said like, hey, you know what? We're playing USA. Like we're going to bring in Danielle. Like she's fresh. She's new. Like they've never seen her before. Yep. That might have been their intent. But like when they translated that to you, like the competitor in you flipped that to like, what the hell? Like, why wouldn't you? Like, why would you? Yeah, I totally like, and that's so cool, because what you're saying basically, as a competitor, there has to be a moment where you can't have those what ifs or those question marks in your head. You can't second guess your ability. You can't say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like you have to go in full-fledged, like 110% all in. Yeah. In the belief that I'm the best person in this position to get this done. And then you just have to let like that muscle memory and like your preparation take over. Yeah. And so I think that's such a testament to like, you were still so young, like you hadn't even started college yet. And you already had to like put yourself in those situations where, you know, I'm facing some of the best ever, and I'm still going to come in and just put my game face on. So,
and so much respect in that moment, knowing the people that I was facing. Like there was so much, but the beauty of sport and what I've always loved is like when you cross the lines, like it doesn't matter who steps in the box. And pitchers, sorry, we got to be different. We have to have this different mentality, this ego, alter ego, whatever you want to call it. Like, because there's a lot more pressure in our role. There's heavy pressure when you have to step up and the game's on the line and you have to be able to like get a big clutch hit for your team or else game's over. I feel that. I know that. But every single pitch, pitchers have to be present. And you're dealing with some of these hitters, and it's scary. Like Doza to me still was Doza and Bustos were by far the toughest hitters to face. Like the bat speed and like Bustos' ability to be able to turn on pitches, and I didn't wear a mask. It's terrifying. Kelly Kutchman's up there too. And in that moment, it was just like, hey, just go hit good spots, trust your catcher, and have that ego. And I did. And that's one thing that I've always appreciated about my role as a pitcher, and what I try to teach any pitcher I come in contact with. Like, you carry yourself with that type of confidence, because if you show any sign of weakness, they got you.
Right.
If they got you, they will beat you. And so to me, that game taught so many lessons that I was able to carry on to go to UW, but it definitely put a target on my back, but there was no NIL attached. So I didn't feel any. When you're going in your freshman year, you don't feel nearly what the athletes feel now. But I think transitioning to that 2008 Olympic year, like that to me was, gosh, it's crazy. Like getting to experience two with a significant amount of life experience in between. My biggest regret from the 2008 Olympics was wanting to be more present and more where my feet were at and enjoying that whole process.
Yeah.
And I was so young. Like I just turned 21 before the Olympic Games kicked off. But that 2007 fall heading into 2008, like I had to redshirt that whole year.
Because of the Olympics.
Yeah, because we had to train and we all had to like kind of be together and start that run. And I mean, with Canada, at least, we lived in or trained at UNLV. Lonnie Alameda was our pitching coach, who's now the head coach at Florida State. She was at UNLV, so she had provided us those facilities to be able to use, but we had to apply for grants with Canada, which is very interesting, but like you could apply for additional funding. So we had to pay, they paid for our flights, but we had to pay for our housing for the 3 months that we were in Vegas. So like Jen Salling and I roomed together and did like this like Airbnb where people actually lived there. So grinder. But I had to apply for this grant because I didn't have the like financial means to be able to like spend all this money. So it was $5,000.
Right.
And I got accepted. But you know the crazy thing? After that Olympic Games, going into the fall of the 2008 before the 2009 one, I had to pay the whole $5,000 back because of the NCAA and their stupid rules.
Oh my gosh.
But I took the whole year off. So I had taken the whole year off. And who was the only one on roster that had to pay back the whole $5,000? Me.
Yeah.
And I sit here and I'm like getting petty about $5,000, and Livy Dunn's making $10 million at LSU. And I'm like, hey.
Well, because the red tape and like the processes don't always make sense.
No, it doesn't. I can't sit here and say that I'm jealous of the time that they're at now. Like and you're probably the same, like proud of the time that you came
Pros
from.
and cons. Yeah, for sure.
Pros and cons. But when you think about like that 2008, like Olympics, is there anything that stands out to you that you can kind of recall?
I feel like where I was at mentally, like with my game, like I had just signed my letter of intent and all that stuff, and I was getting ready to leave. Like I was stoked about it, but like in my head at that point in time, it was like,
sorry,
when you're fine. When you're little, like you watch the Olympic Games and you're like, oh, that's what I want to do. Like I feel like every young softball player who's in Little League or like decides that this is what they want to do, like they have that moment of like, I want to play in the Olympics, because that for us is the epitome of our sport. It's not the MLB, it's not the NFL, it's the Olympics. Like I want to compete for Team USA. And so by the time I got there, I was going through this reality check of like, yes, I get to go play, but like I could never make that team. Like, and so it was so cool to watch because again, there were still so many people that I recognized and it was becoming a bigger thing. But moving into college, I was like, these girls are all the same age as me and they've already been on the team for 2 to 3 years. Like I think it was more of still a pipe dream for me. And then realizing I'm going to now start playing against these people. Like that hadn't hit me yet. That I was technically at that, like at their normal level, not like their Olympic level, but like their day-to-day stuff. I think that was sort of what was happening. It was a rough time.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think of that 2008 like Olympics, and one of the coolest moments that I wish I was in person for and I wasn't because I was a bitter Betty, was watching like Japan beat Team USA, right? Like Team USA has won every single 96 on,
right?
And they put together a team that had, probably 80% of the same roster people that they had from that 2004. Obviously a couple different players in the mix, but I think when you think about the 2004 and someone like Yukiko Ueno for Japan, like being able to throw that perfect game and gaining that confidence through that, like Ueno is one of the most incredible athletes that I've ever witnessed in person. Her size, just her confidence on the mound, how she can throw her composure. Like girlfriend can throw 74 miles an hour when she wants to, and then she can reel it in and throw 68 and spin it the way she needs to. And she can just spread the zone so well. But, the thing about Japan is like that women's professional league that they have over there. Like I played over there for a little bit and they had the 12 teams. I don't know if it's expanded since. But softball is life over there.
1,000%. Totally different scenario. Yeah.
The attention to detail on the training is what always gives them the competitive advantage. And when they finally won, to me, it's like they trust in their abilities, but also know like that they've seen a Kat Osterman, right? They've seen Kat Osterman. And they remember her like that. Yeah. From that 2004, like to me, their biggest thing is like their ability to make adjustments better than anyone else. From the time that I faced them in the 2020 Olympics, I didn't face them in 2008, but they are the hardest offense. Like it's a pitch by committee almost at times, because to beat those hitters 3 times is so hard. And that, to me, like giving Team USA the first loss ever in the finals. And it was kind of a grind of a game because they had the big weather delay. I don't know if you remember that, but there was like a big period of time where the weather came in, tarp goes on. Like, so to be able to deal with that, I mean, I think was the coolest thing. But I remember when they put the roster out, and I don't know if I'll get grilled for saying this for USA, but that's when they had, who had not been there in 2004, but Vicky Galindo, Lauren Lappin, Caitlin Lowe, and those were kind of like the 3 big add-ons. And Monica Abbott did not go in 2004, but I mean, she's the K queen of all time. You got to give her that. And Andrea Duran. So they had a big shift in where things were at. And I think the biggest thing to me, I'm not going to say a mistake, but something that stands out was making Lisa Fernandez an alternate. And when you make someone like that an alternate, this is the reason why we had Lauren Bay Regula selected for our 2020 team. And we chose her over somebody else. That experience is invaluable. Somebody that has experienced Olympics, Fernandez, 96, 2000, 2004. Yeah, that means maybe somebody else doesn't get an opportunity, but that's what you look to in the moments of hard. That is the fierce competitor in my eyes that made me believe that this is what I want to do, watching someone like that play back.
I mean, you can't talk softball without talking about Lisa Fernandez. And like, I had the opportunity at one of our NFCA conventions to talk to her, like as a coach when I was at UC Davis, and we sat there and we were just talking shop, and like, you just know that you're in the presence of greatness. Like it's the craziest, like most surreal thing. And so putting somebody like that on an alternate list, like that sends a message that may or may not have been as I don't even want to say competitive, but like when you, and maybe this is just like you and me, like we're so cutthroat crazy about it, but like you want to send a message to everybody that tries to stand up against you and like oppose you on the other dugout. Like we're going to puff our chests out. Like, you want to go? Let's go. And like, I would not want anybody besides Lisa Fernandez, like next to me doing that, because she does not back down. Like, she is that. It's almost an intimidation factor. Like, as a pitcher, like, you don't want to face her. Like,
totally.
Not for a second. But beyond her hitting capabilities, it was her grind, right? Like her. Did we lose you? There we go. Okay.
Sorry.
Like, cut out for a second. Sorry. It was her competitive edge. It was her attitude. It was just that swagger that she had. So I fully agree that we won't say it was a mistake, but it was definitely it changed it, right? Like, it changed the whole scenario. And I think there was a decision made in 2020 that did the same thing. But
yes. So
before we get to that,
I think about 2008 and like a couple different, I can only speak from my own experience. I'm not speaking from anyone else that competed on the 2008 Team Canada team. This is me. When we got to the Olympic Games, I was one of four or one of three siblings that were competing. My brother was with Team Canada Baseball.
Right.
And, getting to be in that type of atmosphere with your brother was one of the coolest experiences ever. I think the one thing that frustrated me more than ever, and I let it get to me, was not being able to watch any other Olympic sports. It was our team rule. Until the Olympics were over for softball, like that period had ended, we were not allowed to go watch anything prior to that because it could have been considered a distraction or taking you out of your routine and all of these things. And that, to me, I think I look back on and I'm like, shit, like that was Michael Phelps and the run that he had. Mm-hmm. That was Lolo Jones hitting the hurdle and not getting an Olympic medal. And that was her year. There was so many moments that I look back on and I'm like, man, I wish that I could have gotten to see that. And I asked. So with Canada, we had a good run. Like I was looking, we beat Taipei, we beat the Netherlands, we lost to US, we beat China 1-0. We lost to Venezuela, lost to Australia, and lost to Japan. But for some reason we were still able to make the medal round. Not sure how that worked. So the day before you start the medal round, you get a day off. My brother's team was playing at 12:30, Team Canada Baseball, but they stunk. They weren't going to make it into the medals. It was just, so I remember going and asking Lori Sipple and just being like, hey, coach, like, is there any way I can go watch my brother play at 12:30? I'll sit in the shade. I'll just stay for a couple innings. Like my grandma's there, my mom and dad's there, my aunt's there. Like, and she said no. And it was just like this moment that at freshly 21 years old, I don't think you understand how to handle. So that pissed me off about my Olympic experience. And number two, I really wish that I could have been better for everyone else. I was super selfish. I had a really big ego and I didn't know how to break that down for the greater of the team.
Do you think it was like you connected less with everybody else because of it? Like you were so in your little bubble?
The whole year was a bit of a grind for me. But these women were significantly older. We had some girls that were young, Jen Sowling and I, Jen Yee was on the team who played at Georgia Tech. So like there was some young athletes, but there was just this disconnect. And I've never been able to, I can look back on it, but the one thing I wish that I would have learned younger was being able to take myself out of it. Like if I'm not the one for the job and my name is not the one that's being called, support the pitcher and the team because you're still a part of the team. And at times I'd only ever known the ball in my hand. Like, why am I not getting it? Why is this not me?
So it became
the moment that like registers the most, and I say this and people go, man, I can't believe you can fully admit this. But if I say something that impacts somebody else where they can go, damn, I've done that before and I can't do that. So the day before we were going to play in the medal game, Lauren Bay had tweaked her groin and she was our star, right? 2004 Olympian, great experience. You knew she was going to get majority of the games. So Sipple called me up to her room and said, hey, I think you're going to get the start tomorrow in the bronze medal game against Australia because Bay's tweaked her groin. So like, you're going to start. And kind of that moment hit me where I was like, shit, like this is why all the bad stuff happened and the turmoil and all the things where I needed to be better and I wasn't. This is my opportunity to be able to like bridge that gap and be there. And so I went back to my room and I'm like sitting in, the village in the room and going through like the Ken Ravizza heads up baseball stuff. I'm going through facing Australia and seeing myself face Stacey Porter and seeing my change up. And I'm like, it was probably the most excited I'd been in months. And the next morning there was enough time where I could get up, go to breakfast with my brother in the village and talking to him how excited I was, and then go back up, get changed and get in the elevator. And Sip was in the elevator and she just goes, yeah, you're not going to start anymore. And like to say at like 34 at the 2020 Olympics, could I have taken that information and been like, okay, yep, I can process it. Doesn't feel good, but I know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, I took it and it destroyed me in that moment. And like, when you're trying to hold back the tears. So I'm just like in the elevator, like, shit, get me to the bottom. I got to get out of here. I don't want her to see that I'm crying. So the first person I run to is like Jen Salling, who is, homie. And I'm like, dude, like, I'm not starting anymore. I'm rattled. Like, you got to like help me. And she's like, hey, like, there's still an opportunity you may get in the game. And we have a chance to like, it's a bronze medal game. Like, go and fight your ass off. And oh, my biggest regret is like going into that game being so butthurt and so mad it wasn't me and wishing for someone else to do shitty because that person wasn't me.
Right. Because like deep down, that's what you were feeling. Like I for sure wanted her to trip and fall and hurt herself. And
And when she's pitching, it's almost like, even though this was the biggest game of our life, this was my shit mentality at 21. Mm-hmm. So horrible that was what was going on and what was going on upstairs. But I didn't know how to deal with my emotions in that big arena with this and what I was told and the animosity with this team and ups and downs I'd gone through. I knew they didn't like me. So in that moment, for me to throw my 21-year-old ego aside and be like, yeah, I'm all about the team, I couldn't do that. And that is my biggest regret. Because if I teach my daughter's team anything, when it comes to this piece, we don't wish bad on anybody. Because at the end of the day, like, what's meant to be will be. And the attitude and how we go about our business is so key. And so listen to this. The next, we lose that game, I think in the 6th inning. We were winning. We end up losing that game. Absolute heartbreaker. And so I go to the friends and family area. Coach Tar was there, who was, head coach at Washington, my parents. And I remember hugging Coach Tar and being like, hey, like, not crying, everyone else bawling. Because this was the closest Canada had ever been to potentially winning an Olympic medal. Like, it was a big deal. We were good enough. We were good enough to do it. I don't know if we had the maturity to do it or the leaders to be able to get people going in the right direction, but we had the talent. It's just, do you have the right leader of the ship that can navigate that piece, bring everyone together, and can the leaders throw the ego aside and get everyone rowing in the same direction? We couldn't do it. So hugging Coach Tara and being like, there's no way, like, we won't win. Like, the things that I'm learning about myself and how I need to be better, meaning there's no way we won't win a national championship that 2009 year, was because I'd never felt this stew of emotions and things I needed to be better. And the other thing that I regret was after we lost that game and we all supposed to go back on the bus. I didn't go back on the bus. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I went with my mom and dad to my brother's game in my Team Canada uniform. This was the first time I cried, besides that moment in the elevator, was drinking a beer in the stands with my Team Canada jersey and my parents by my side watching my brother play and my grandma. And I'm just like, it's like it all hit me at once. Like, this Olympics was ending. It wasn't the experience I wanted. This was the first time getting to see my brother compete. Why did this happen this way? You start to question so many things, but yet I'm in this moment in my uniform, and the only people in the whole world that really matter to me the most are right here. And it was like this piece of like vulnerability where like I can just be, if I want to cry, I can cry. If I want to chug a beer, I can chug a beer. And I just felt like I was finally like let loose. And the hard part was going back to the village, and like I had been kind of locked out of my room, and no one like was getting back to me, and didn't end up getting to spend the night in my room. I had to spend the night in a alternate rower, UW rower. And no joke, Alex, his buddy just won a silver medal with Team Canada. And there's photos of me sitting on the bed in a UW top, holding and looking down at this like silver medal. And my face is like so puffy because it was just, you don't get over. Yeah, you don't get over that type of trauma.
It's emotional. It's not like, it's not just a normal loss. It's not just a game. There's so many other things behind it. It's an experience. It's a moment, and feeling all of that slip through your fingers. Like,
we were so close though. We were like beating Australia really up until the 5th or the 6th inning. So every inning you're like, shit, maybe we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then you lose on a dagger. I still remember seeing the hit go over the left fielder's head. And it just hits you different. I think every athlete goes through some period of like postpartum after an Olympic Games. I was just fortunate enough to be able to roll right into college season, where it almost didn't give me time to digest that piece, but it was also like Olympics was work and UW was family. And I always felt welcome with my family. So was there things that I personally needed to be night and day different to earn the respect of my teammates on a higher level than what I had the first couple of years at UW? Hell yeah. That Olympic experience put me in a position to grow far more than any athlete gets to from the time they're 18 to when they graduate at 22. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that Olympic experience gives you something that not a lot of people understand. And I believe that really not until you're well into your 30s that you are at your best as an athlete, because you understand how to navigate so many different pieces to the game. When you're 18, softball is softball. Body feels good. We're in it. But to be able to compartmentalize the mental piece and how important that is, I felt like I got to learn all of that in a short amount of time. So when people ask, as hard as that Olympic run was for me personally, not speaking for anyone else, would I go back and do it again? Hell yes, I would, because it made me into a player that was able to do some individual cool things, great, but to be a part of that national championship team, I could not have been the pitcher they needed me to be if I did not go through the heartbreak and the moments where I realized, like, dude, I'm not a good teammate. I'm not what I need to be.
Yeah, it all happened for a reason. It all set you up for that success. But like sometimes you do really have to hit that rock bottom before you can really start to climb in a way that you've never done it before. Yeah. And like that tool set, that like just all of it, I think part of it's anger, part of it's like frustration, part of it is resentment, part of it is guilt, like all of those things. And then having to flip it so quickly.
Yeah.
Really just, I mean, it makes sense.
Crazy though, but you know, I really look back and, you know, in our next episode, we're rolling in and talking about 2020, like that 2008 version of myself is what made me perk up and want to go back.
Right.
Like the mark that maybe I had left on Team Canada, whether it's through rumors or individual people that felt a certain way about me. Yeah, I'm completely different in 2008 than I was in 2020. And I wanted to be able to go and be a leader in the sense that this is how I wish people were able to help me. And they didn't know how to help me. And obviously, when you have someone that's rough and tough and really hard to work with, I get it. But I still needed this sense of love and vulnerability from people that could help break that part down. So like when we go into our next segment and we talk that piece, like that was the driving force for me wanting to go back. Hell yeah, it's cool to do an Olympics again. But what type of mark do you want to leave?
That redemption.
Yes. And the leader is key for me.
Yeah. You knew coming back that like It wasn't just about just being a member of the team. It wasn't just a name on the roster for you. It was, I'm going to come back and they're going to remember that part of the type of player I was, the person that I was, and more than just the pitcher that you were, the teammate that I was, the support that I was, the way that you were able to be that person that wasn't there for you previously. Yeah.
Knowing that those were the things that I learned in between that stint of time that really can change someone's perspective on the game and help them.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things we can talk about in our next episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Olympics is the pinnacle of why we do and why we try to compete at the highest level. Like,
yeah. And I think too, was 2008, is that when they announced that there wasn't going to be softball in 12 and 16, right? Like, well, maybe 16 hadn't been decided. I think now that I'm thinking back, I'm like, probably real. I think that was a piece of why what I was also thinking about was like that pinnacle of everything we try to do. And like, I'm getting ready to go to college, like prove like, oh, I want to keep going. I want to keep doing this. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to yank that back out from under you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been such a huge struggle for softball players these last like 10 to 15 years, has been the up and down of we're having it, we're not having it, we're having it, we're not having it. So we'll definitely get into that more in next episode too. But I think that that's a big piece of it's hard to look back on that stuff and realize like how naive you were, how young you were, how hard it was, but like how cool is it now, right? Like you get to, and you got the chance to go back and redeem yourself. Not everybody gets that. So I think that it speaks a lot to like your journey. So we're going to continue that in the next episode, getting into 2020 and the chaos that was that year, and talk a little bit about this year's Olympics and 2028. So tune in, let us know if you have any questions, and we'll get to it. Thanks for
we need more questions, everyone. Write us some questions. I'm putting it out there and I'm not getting
we know bites. You guys want the juicy details.
Ask us some questions, please.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, we'll see you guys next time.